In today's video, I'm going to show you how to make a healthy loaf of bread. This is my fastest, easiest and most used recipe. Even if you've never made bread before, you can do this. So this is my sort of daily bread recipe. I have other more fancy breads that I make from time to time. Perhaps I'll share those on this channel. But this is just your basic, delicious whole grain bread recipe. It is healthy. Now, it does contain some oil. Please don't leave all your seed oil conspiracy theories in the comments section of this video. I'm not really interested in them. You can swap out the oil I use for a different type of oil, but don't use olive oil because this is not the recipe for olive oil. It's too heavy for this recipe. What puts people off making bread is two things, basically the time it takes and the clear up. Now, the time it takes is all in the rising. It's a really quick recipe other than that. So you just have to make sure you're at home for a couple of hours. Maybe you're self-employed like me and work from home, but if not, perhaps you can start this early evening or better yet, on one of your days off. Now, in regards to cleaning up, I'm going to give you some tips at the end of the video so that you can make this bread with minimal disruption to your life and your kitchen, and you're not going to end up in a big old mess. So we're going to start our recipe with some whole grain flour. I've got this Allinson's country grain. This is my favorite one to use for this recipe. But I'm also going to add a little bit of strong white flour. So I've measured this out and it's approximately 400 grams of the whole grain. And then I've added about 100 grams of strong white bread flour. I say about because I don't usually measure it. I just tip the brown in until I get to about 400 or just over, and then I top up with the white. You don't want to replace more than about a third of this with white flour because otherwise you'll get a bread that rises too much and will probably overwhelm your tin, shall we say. But apart from that, quantities of brown to white not needed to be specific. To this, we are going to add 2 teaspoons of Easy Bake yeast. I feel like I'm doing an advertisement for this company. I'm really not. It's just the one that's in all of our supermarkets. So this is not a fresh yeast. This is a yeast that's been suspended in some way. And we're going to add 2 teaspoons directly to the flour. We're going to add 1 teaspoon of salt and 1, let's make it a nice heaped teaspoon of granulated sugar. We're going to mix all of those together. Then we're going to add our 2 wet ingredients. I've got here 260 mils of warm water. So warm, not hot. If it's too hot, it'll kill the yeast, but it does need to be warm. Next, I'm going to add some cold pressed rapeseed oil. If you're in America, you'll call this canola oil. And we're going to add 70 mils until we make it up to 330. Now I'll take this over to the mixer. I'm going to pour this in and I'm going to use my dough hook to knead this bread dough. However, you can just as easily knead by hand. If you don't know how to do that, I'm going to do the second knead that this bread needs by hand. So keep watching the video and you'll see how to do this later on. So what we're going to do is we're going to put this in the mixer and I'm going to let it knead for 5 minutes. That's 5 minutes after it's all combined. You might need to use a bit of a spatula around the edges just to get it all combined to start with. Then I'm going to place it into a bowl that I have oiled slightly, so just wiped around with a little touch of oil. I'm going to get a clean cloth, put it under the tap and wring it out, so a damp cloth, and we're going to place that over the bowl. I'm now going to place it into my airing cupboard, which is a cupboard that most of us have in the UK where the hot water tank is. But you can put this anywhere that's warm, the warmest place you can find in your house. And we're going to leave it for a minimum of 30 minutes. I tend to leave this one for 40 to 45, but if you're short of time, 30 is enough. So what we need now is a 1 pound loaf tin like this, and I've got one of these removable paper liners. I'm actually going to take it out because we're going to place the bread on it before it goes in, but before that we need to knock the bread back and knead it. So what you'll find is that your bread has risen, your dough has risen, and as soon as you start to move it, it's going to start deflating. Don't worry, that is perfectly normal because this is the knocking back stage. So basically, you're just going to knead it a little bit. You can punch it if it reminds you of your ex-boyfriend. That's always good fun. and we're going to knead the bread on a floured surface. So the main thing when you're kneading is to stretch the bread. So it's that pressing with the heel of your hand that stretches the bread, and I believe it strengthens the gluten strings or something like that. I'm not a scientist, but anyway, this is what we need to do, is to stretch the bread. You only need to knead it at this point for 2 or 3 minutes. I always like to do this bit by hand. Then we're going to start shaping it, and we want the top of the bread to have a nice curve to it when it comes out of the oven. So we're going to almost tuck it in. So you're going to start turning it and tucking and stretching that top layer down until you feel like you've got this nice stretched surface to it, and it's a nice slightly rounded shape. Then we're going to place it on the paper case and lift it into the tin. Next, we're going to cover it again with the damp cloth. The cloth is damp so that the bread doesn't dry out, and also so that if the bread rises, it won't stick too much to the cloth. And we're going to place it in our warm place again for another minimum of 30 minutes. My oven actually takes 10 minutes to heat up, so I tend to set a timer for 30 minutes. Once that goes off, I put the oven on to heat up and set the timer again for 10, so the bread has about 40 minutes to rise. As I said, if you're pushed for time, you can do another 30 minutes. You don't have to be too exact here with your rising times. You can leave this for up to an hour at either stage and it will be just fine. Now my bread has had its second rise. I'm going to take this cloth off carefully, just peel it back. Occasionally it'll stick a little bit. Now, if you get any dough stuck to the cloth, the best thing to do is just to dry the cloth out in a very warm place. I'll just throw mine on a radiator, pick off any large chunks, and then you can just throw it in the washing machine as usual. And here's our bread ready to go in the oven. It's risen nicely. It's got a nice surface on it. We're going to place it in quite a hot oven. Now my oven, generally I would cook an average meal at about 180 degrees. So I'm going to put this in at about 210. You might want to go up to 220 depending on whether or not you've got a fan oven. A little bit lower in a fan oven. I'll leave all the details in the video description. We're going to put this in for 30 minutes initially, and then we'll test if it's done. So this is just out of the oven. Keep your oven on because we're going to need to put this back in for 5 minutes to crisp it up, but it may need longer. So what we'll do at this stage is I've just got this sort of blunt plastic knife. These are great. They're meant for sort of cutting quiches and things without ruining your cookware. And we're just going to loosen it slightly. Now, it's sometimes easier to get out than other times. Today feels like a good one. And what we're going to do is we're going to flip it upside down and knock on the bottom. So what we're looking for is a hollow sound. Now that's fine. That tells me that that is cooked. It's going back in the oven for 5 minutes to crisp it up. If it doesn't sound hollow like that, if it kind of sounds soft and thuddy, then give it another 10 minutes and check it again. So here's my bread out of the oven. You can see that I've raised the drying rack up on some glass jars, and this just stops a load of condensation forming underneath the bread. Now at this stage you're really going to want to cut the bread and eat some lovely warm bread, but I do advise you not to, because if you cut the end off, what's going to happen is you're going to let all the air into the middle of the bread and dry it out, and it won't keep as long. So be patient and allow it to cool. What a beautiful perfect loaf this is. So I've cut the end off of my bread now, it's cool, and I'm going to have mine with this roasted garlic pate. I've already popped that recipe up on the channel. I'll leave a link at the end of this video. But first of all, I'm just going to give you some tips on cleaning up so that you can make the bread very easily without getting your kitchen in a big old mess. So let me give you some tips now for working clean. Well, the first thing to do is once you've measured your ingredients out, put everything away before you start doing the mixing part. But don't actually combine the wet and dry ingredients until you're ready to start. Like anything that's got some activation ingredients in, you don't want to sort of mix those together until you're ready to start the cooking process. So clear all your ingredients away. And then as soon as you've done the mixing part, either the first or the second part, what you want to do is Get those bowls and things straight into warm soapy water. You just chuck everything in. I usually just get the mixing bowl itself and stick things in there with warm soapy water. And then what you need to do is, either with your hands or with rubber gloves on, as I prefer, is you want to clean the majority of the dough and the mess off just using your hands or rubber gloves. Do not take a dishwashing brush, a cloth, or a sponge into that bread dough residue, because all that's going to happen is you're going to ruin those cloths. It's all going to get stuck to the cloths. It's going to be horrible. So whether you plan to do the washing up at the end by hand or you're going to use a dishwasher, you want to remove the majority of it with warm soapy water, just using either your hands or your rubber gloves. When it comes to the surface itself, if you've got flour on there, you want to remove the majority of that flour before you wipe the surface. Again, it'll just stick to the cloth and it'll pretty much never come out. Now, I've got one of those special bread making tools. I've forgotten the name of it. One that helps you to scoop the bread up and also cut the bread if you want to make rolls, for example. Some of you are probably horrified that I also use this to scrape my worktop clean, but I am unrepentant. If you don't have something like this, I'm sure you've got something like an old credit card or something that you can scrape that surface with. Get as much of that flour off and into the bin before you even start to wipe with a cloth. If you do these things, you'll find that cleanup will be absolutely easy and you won't end up throwing away your dishwashing cloths or your sponges or your brushes. So I've put the red recipe in the description of this video. I've also given you double quantities because I myself tend to make 2 of these and pop one in the freezer. You know, I'm all about using the freezer. That way, when you want homemade bread and you really are too busy to make it from scratch, you've got one already in the freezer ready to go. This bread keeps really well, and I would like nothing more than for you to tell me in the comments that you're going to have a go at making it, or even that you have made it. So do let me know how you get on. Remember to stay kind to yourself, stay kind to other people, and most of all, stay kind to the animals.